I'm sure the majority of you are all playing Pokemon Go whenever you can or whenever you're out and about. How many of you all have dedicated trips specifically to Pokemon Go? I did, and I kind of regret it. So where we live, Ghastlies are pretty hard to come by. I think I've only ever caught 2 on my various outings, and Gengar is always one of my go-to Pokemon whenever the core games come out. So I really wanted to get my hands on one. My name is Finn, and I have a few friends that I'd go out with. My girlfriend, Harley, and our friends Sean and Gwen. We went to the beach a few times and into the city centre to hunt Pokemon. We got some cool ones, such as a bunch of Magikarps, Mankeys, and each of us ended up with high-leveled Snorlaxes too. I had a severe lack of water Pokemon, with the only ones I had being Magikarp and a lucky Seadra that I caught in the car park of a Toys R Us. So I was told, want water Pokemon? Go to the water. I applied this logic to Ghastly. Want ghost Pokemon? Hit up some graveyards or hospitals. Morbid, yes, I know, but you get the idea. Now, in the city I live in, there's a weird stretch between 2 hospitals that has 6 graveyards, each with Pokestops, totaling 8 that we could hit while walking about trying to hatch our eggs. Nothing. Well, not nothing. We caught a ton of Pokemon and each of us hatched about 3 eggs, but still there were no ghost Pokemon to be found. That was a bust. We got in our cars to go home, and as I was about to pull out of the car park, my phone started ringing. It was Gwen. I answered and enabled the speakerphone. She told us that if we had real balls of steel that we could go and check out the old abandoned building that had been a bunch of things over the years. It was an office building, then it had been used as the town hall, then a boarding school, and eventually it was just abandoned and the city hadn't figured out what to do with it yet. A spooky building? That was bound to have ghost Pokemon in it. Right? So we decided to go immediately. We were a group of people that would always try to one-up each other, so saying no to a spooky old building was like showing weakness, or accepting defeat. It took about an hour to get there. It was roughly 7 PM in July. The sun wasn't setting yet, but it would spring upon us pretty quickly when it did. And even if it was pretty light outside, indoors it would get pretty dingy. We pulled up at a pub that was about 1 kilometre from the abandoned school. We went in, had a pint, and then walked the rest of the way. 3 cars parked outside of a chain link fence was bound to raise suspicion, so leaving them at the pub was probably a good idea. We arrived at the school, hatched some eggs along the way, only to discover that the building was a Pokestop. Not unheard of, but it was pretty odd. I kicked at the edge of one section of the fence enough to make it come away from its pole, and we were able to slip through. We walked around the back of the very intimidating building to find that there were no boards covering any of the windows back there. This was actually great news. Those windows faced west, meaning we'd have as much natural illumination as possible. We looked at our phones to see that there was a bunch of Rattatas and Pidgeys, and nothing else. But this building was huge. A single ping that emits from your avatar in Pokemon Go didn't even reach the middle point of the building, meaning that we could go into the building in order to search for Pokemon. We tried the doors and surprisingly they were unlocked. Very odd, but it was good news for us. Upon entering, we were immediately hit by a weird vibe. Something just seemed off, and it was at least 5 or 6 degrees colder than it was outside. Up on the right wall, just by the door, was a little map. If we were to follow a certain corridor to the middle of the building, we'd hit a room called Place of Prayer, Reflection and Confession. If we took a different corridor, we'd hit a room called Dark Room. A room on the top floor of the building was labelled Solitary. And oddly enough, there was a basement. Basements are pretty few and far between in this country, so it was a little odd to see one. That was labelled Level -1. Being the geniuses that we all are, we decided to split up. Gwen decided to check out the prayer room. Harley wanted to go and check out the solitary room, and Sean quickly called dibs on the dark room, which meant I was left the short straw of the basement. None of us really had a fear of the dark or anything like that, hence why we were able to even enter this building in the first place. I, however, did have a small fear of the unknown. If I was facing a door and had no clue what was on the other side, it was pretty likely I would not be going through it. I looked down at my phone and my avatar wasn't really moving, obviously since we were indoors and the GPS wasn't picking us up. That didn't stop Pokemon from popping up though. There were a bunch of Weedles and Pidgeys that greeted me on my way down to the basement. On the nearby tab though, there was the silhouette of a coughing, a Ghastly, a Haunter, and oddly enough, another Magikarp. I was hoping that all of these would pop up, but it was highly unlikely. I got down to the basement door. It had taken me about 10 minutes to walk there. Those corridors were long and the stairs seemed to go on for miles. I found myself staring at a door, scanning every inch of it, taking in every single little bit. Now, if this door had have been a little bit dirty, or if it had have been a rusted metal door, then I would have figured it was just a door that was old. Not this door. This door was brand new. The stone walls, concrete floors, and the wooden stairs that led down to this sparkling white metal framed door with frosted glass, it just seemed wrong. It was illuminated with white LED lights and also had a fingerprint lock on the door. I approached the door and the fingerprint lock fired up with a message. Please place registered finger onto the pad. I did so and obviously it gave the message, fingerprint not recognized. Please try again. I looked down at my phone and saw that nothing was spawning. However, I was precisely where I was on the map. This is a little weird because whenever I'm in an enclosed building, the avatar just sort of pings around the map. I looked up to the ceiling and saw that there was a gaping hole through the ceiling. All of the floors and the roof of the building had a hole in it. A hole that basically went through 5 layers of a building in a straight line. I was inspecting the hole, which must have had a diameter of at least roughly 2 to 3 meters, to try and figure out what the hell could have made that hole. I'm looking down at my feet, there's nothing there that could have caused it. Unless something went up, and that's completely illogical. As I'm looking up at each floor, I saw something on the top layer. It looked like someone's forehead and eyes. I shouted up, "Sean, is that you?" The features retracted behind the floorboards, agonizingly slow. Just as I was about to look away, there was a shadow move from one side to the other. What the hell was that? It looked like a person, but if it was, they were very fast and able to jump quite far. I got a bad feeling. I looked back at the gleaming door before taking off the way I just came in search of the others. Obviously, the first person I wanted to go after was Harley. I needed to make sure she was alright. She was my priority. I had no idea what was going on in this damn building, and I needed to know she was alright. I was sprinting through the building, and in order to get to the solitary room, I had to pass the prayer room. I ran past it, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught something odd. I backed up and peered into the huge room that may as well have just been called a church. There were no pews. There was only long strips of padded mats. Up on the back wall was a figure of Jesus on a cross. But the thing that caught my eye was a shoe poking out from behind the podium. I ran up to it as I got closer. It was clearly evident that there was a body attached to the shoe. It was Gwen, face down on the ground. I flipped her over onto her back, and thankfully she was breathing. I shook her to wake her, and she came to. That was when I noticed the blood. Parts of her face and head, her arm, and the floor were covered in the stuff. I asked what happened, and she didn't even remember entering the room. I looked down at her phone and noticed Pokemon Go was still running on it, and was running the camera feature. I picked it up and started following the arrows, and saw there was a Ghastly on the screen. Gwen actually found the main thing we came here for. But then I thought, why was it in camera mode? Gwen swiped the phone back and called the ghastly. I know, priorities, right? I figured she had a concussion and was a little out of it. Let me see that a sec. Why? Well, look at yourself, you're hurt. Now give me your phone. She handed it over and started freaking out at all the blood. She was no longer a little bit out of it. I opened the Photos app and looked at the last photos taken. 3 were of the ghastly in the prayer room. Do you remember taking these? What? No, I don't remember anything since the map. I opened the pictures, flicking through them, and nearly dropped the phone when looking at the last photo taken. The first was of Ghastly floating just above the podium. The next was of Ghastly in the same place, this time facing the door. But the third had Ghastly in the top left corner, hardly in frame. In the centre of the frame, however, was the figure of someone running towards the camera. My blood ran cold. Fuck, this isn't stopping. Gwen was referring to the cut on her arm. It was deep. So the blood wasn't just going to stop. I took off my hoodie, tore the arm, and tied it around the wound. Right, I think it's time we left. Someone's here. We need to get Harley and Sean and get the hell out of here. Gwen nodded in agreement, and as I was helping her to her feet, we heard a blood-curdling scream from upstairs. Harley. We both took off running up the stairs that led to the room Harley was in. Solitary. On the way there, we ran past the dark room, and just as we were passing it, I collided with something and was sent flying to the floor. I collected myself before realizing that I had just hit Sean, who was also covered from head to toe in what looked like blood. I'm not saying he was wounded, mind you. It looked as though he just had bucket loads of blood dumped on him. Dude, you okay? I think so. That dark room is really fucking dark. Guys, come on, Harley! Myself and Sean groggily got back to our feet and began running up the stairs. As we were about to reach the top, we heard yet another scream, identical to the last one, coming from the middle of the long corridor. I burst through the door and was greeted with a third scream. Harley, hey! Harley, hey! Are you okay? What happened? Finn, oh my god, Finn, someone's here. Someone was just in here, staring at me. I screamed and they threw me against the wall before legging it out the door. Then I saw that and screamed again. She gestured over to a desk. Behind the desk, in the chair that accompanied it, was a body. Gwen let out a yelp of terror, and myself and Sean gave each other cold stares. I approached the body and was about to look for a pulse. Before I did so, though, I took in the sight of it. This person hadn't been here long. This guy looked like he could still be alive if it weren't for the eyes having a staring contest with the ceiling. He was also wearing a white lab coat with a name embroidered on it. Gareth. I went to find a pulse on his neck. Nothing. His death was then 100% confirmed to me, and also made me certain this guy had basically just been killed. Thanks to the stump on his right arm. That stump still had blood trickling out of it onto the floor. This guy's hand had been chopped off. I looked up to the wall and saw a wet, sticky looking patch on it. I then checked the back of Gareth's head. My guess was that whoever had been in here used Gareth's skull to try and dent the wall, and when the poor guy was half dead, they chopped off his hand, securing his death. The huge pool of blood on the floor suggested that injuries to his head and the blood loss meant that he was dead. Under the desk where the blood was travelling to was yet another hole in the floor. I peered down it and saw nothing but darkness. This explained the blood that Sean had been covered in. He must have walked into a steady stream of the stuff and not even realised it until he was basically covered. I returned to a vertical base and exchanged looks with everyone. I was about to tell them that we should call the police when a voice echoed through the halls, originating from downstairs. Laboratory door open. Good morning, Gareth. The basement door. The sudden realization hit me. The shadow I'd seen upstairs, the person who took out Gwen, the figure that scared the hell out of Harley, they had been with this Gareth person before they died and took their hand in order to unlock the white light door to the basement. They'd got there, they'd opened it, so that was our cue to exit. I picked Harley up to make sure she wasn't hurt and was able to move. She had a huge bruise on her back, but thankfully nothing was broken or cut. I checked on Gwen's cut as well, and that was still pretty bad. Sean was just standing in a disgusted position, praying that the blood he was covered in was no way going to harm him. I peered out the door towards the only staircase. The coast was clear. We hugged the wall and single-filed it to the stairs. We carefully made it down the stairs, trying our best not to make any noise. Every little squeak of the wooden stairs would gain a wince from us all. We got to the floor and bombed it for the exit. That was when we all got a horrible feeling. We all suddenly and simultaneously got a feeling of, oh shit, this is fucked, when we saw that the door we used to get into the building was now chained up and locked with the biggest chain links you have ever seen and a massive padlock. I could barely lift the chain to see if it was in fact locked. The windows that were missing panes were far too high for us to reach, so we were forced to find another way out. I then looked at where we were standing. Blood. A trail of blood. I looked in the direction of the trail and it was leading to the route that I had taken earlier to the out-of-place door to the basement. I, somewhat inadvertently, began following it. I wasn't even aware of what I was doing until Sean said, "Hey, are you seriously going down there?" I looked at him slightly confused, and in roughly 1 second I came back round and just said, "Either stay here or come with me, but I need to know what the fuck is down there, and so important to be behind a door like that." The three of them looked at me confused. Of course, with everything that had been happening, I hadn't told them about the door. I told them to follow me and that they would understand as soon as they saw the basement door. We got to the top of the stairs to the basement, and I did not see the same scene I had seen last time. Now, the door had been slightly slid to the side. There was a smeared bloody handprint on the frosted glass, and there was a severed hand on the floor. The hand that belonged to Gareth. I didn't even look back at the guys. I just said, "Go back to the entrance, see if you guys can get a call through to the police. At this point I don't care if we get done for trespassing." Harley then picked up with, "What are you gonna do?" "I need to know what the hell is going on here. Why that door is in this building, why all the secrecy, and why someone was willing to murder just to get in there." As they moved away, Gwen muttered, "All of this for a fucking ghastly in Pokemon. Let's never do this again." Sean was reluctant to leave me alone, but I told him to go to make sure the two girls' injuries were alright, and not getting any worse. Now, I know what you're thinking. Curiosity killed the cat. But I wasn't even thinking about what would happen to me. I just had a feeling that I needed to get into that room. Now, the door was open. I had my opportunity to see what was inside the basement. Call it instinct, pardon the pun, but I knew there was something waiting for me in there. I slowly peered through the door, checking to see if there were any traps or people waiting just around the corner to jump out on me. Nothing there. I proceeded through. The thing that immediately struck me as odd was that the whole place was covered in white paint. It was as if everything, stone, concrete, wood and metal, needed to be painted white. The smell of the stuff was enough to make me know that this was indeed paint, and it nearly made me gag a few times. It was fresh, which was odd. I walked down the corridor, which was actually getting smaller. Now, I'm not a short dude. I'm 6'2", and usually tower over everybody I know. It got so small that I had to walk with my posture at almost a right angle. That was when I saw it. More blood smears. There were 2 dragging handprints of blood that were thinning as I moved along what was basically now a tunnel. I then realised that this, murderer, must have been well over my height to be able to throw Harley around. Granted, she is a tiny person at 5'3.5". The half is important, or so I've been told. But even I wouldn't be able to lift her that high and throw her that hard to cause that back injury. This guy was either incredibly huge or just relatively tall and jacked as fuck. Not only this, but this guy had been crawling through to the end of this corridor, while I was just walking bent double and crouched. The curved corridor then finally straightened out and I could see the end of it. A door was slightly ajar, and there at the bottom corner was a hand on top of a small pool of blood. I carefully got up to the door, peeked around into the room, and saw a dead person wearing the same thing Gareth had been wearing, who was dead upstairs. I, trying to be as calm as possible, scanned what I could in the room. I couldn't see much, but I had an idea of the scene. I opened the door, which was easier than it first looked, with it being big, metal and heavy. It was surprisingly light. Once the door was open, my suspicions were confirmed. A big open space, and in the centre of the room was a curtain. Surrounding the curtained off area were the bodies of 8 people, all wearing lab coats. I knelt down to one of them. This person had their name embroidered onto their lab coat, as well as a logo. Sammy, Precursor Industries. Who the hell were Precursor Industries, and what were they doing in the middle of nowhere in an abandoned building? I then realised I was surrounded by all of these bodies. These lifeless bodies. I ran back through the door I came from and vomited all over the floor. I managed to collect myself and get it together enough to go back in. As I edged closer to the centre of the room with the curtained off area, I could hear the sounds of sobbing. Then I heard whispers, sad, crying whispers. "I'm sorry. I failed you. What have they done to you, my love? You were perfect, and now you aren't." I crouch walked my way up to the crack in the curtain and saw them. The man, the monster of a man. He was kneeling down, facing away from me, and was looking at a woman. A woman was strapped to what looked like a modernized dentist chair, restrained and not moving. But she was breathing, so she was alive. The man then stood up. "They've changed you for the worse. You are not the woman I fell in love with. You are not the same. You are not the same." The man then raised up his massive arm above his head, and in a single instant, I heard the crushing of bones under a fist. He raised up again for a second blow, and I found myself shouting, "Hey!" He stopped just before he dropped his fist and glanced over his shoulder. I whispered a little, "Oh shit." He then slowly turned around and revealed himself. He was at least 6'9", had a huge physique, but his face was that which could only be reserved for movie stars. He was handsome. He wasn't the typical Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees that you'd expect from horror stories like this. But this wasn't a horror story. This was happening to me right then. This was my own horror story. And I was not the writer, I was a character. I just hoped I was the main protagonist who survives, and not the expendable character whose only existence is to give the killer a gory on-camera murder. "What the hell did you do here?" I didn't even realise I was able to talk. Again, my instincts were taking over. "Tell me, do you love someone?" Yes, I do." Now what happens when that person you love is lied to, betrayed, and made different? What are you talking about?" The man then threw down a picture onto the floor in front of me. 4 images from a photo booth of 2 people. One was quite clearly the man before me, just a little less murdery. One was a woman, a small, blonde-haired, attractive woman. You'd think they were completely different people. He was looking back down at the woman. Her eyes were flying around the room, clearly looking for help. When I entered her vision, she fixated on me, clearly screaming for help with her eyes. The man said, "She isn't the same. I'm not the same. There's no way back. You shouldn't have come here." Why? Because now I have to kill one more person than I intended to. As he finished this sentence, in one sweeping motion, the man pulled a meat cleaver from his long jacket while spinning to face me. Flight mode activated. I legged it for the door, but just as I was a meter or so from it, there was a huge tug on my collar, and the next thing I knew, I was across the room and had hit the wall and the floor with massive thuds. What was this guy made of? He just managed to throw a 6'2", 210-pound man across the room with ease. I tried to get up, but my body was sluggish. I felt like I had been slowed down to 0.5 times speed. My vision then began to blur, and my consciousness was about to disappear. Before I did though, I heard something. "Freeze! Armed police! Drop the weapon!" I would go on to awaken in hospital roughly 3 days later. I had been knocked so silly I had been put into an induced coma and ended up with a massive concussion. One that meant I was very lucky to be alive. I was told that I had stumbled upon an illegal research centre. Me and my friends should have been arrested for trespassing, but because it led to the shutdown of precursor industries, we were let off. It probably also had something to do with the fact the injuries we sustained as well, but they didn't say that. Gwen suffered a massive infection in the cut of her arm, but she managed to pull through it, luckily keeping her arm. Sean was completely fine. The blood he had been doused in was not infectious in any way, so he was lucky. Harley had a cracked shoulder blade and her right arm was broken in 2 places, and will be in a cast for at least 4 months. Me? I just needed to take everything real slow. One sudden movement or fall could make my concussion even worse. Everything after that largely returned to normal. The only thing that kept on niggling at the back of my mind was what happened exactly. We never heard anything from the police about the monster of a man who tried to introduce my brain to a wall. Time went by and the feeling of what the hell happened that night never went away. We still play Pokemon where possible. It wasn't the game's fault or anything like that. It was all of us. A month after this had taken place, I was walking through the city centre in the hopes of hatching some eggs. I eventually got a little tired and decided to walk home, in the hopes of hatching my 3 10k eggs. On the way, I ended up following the directions that Google Maps was giving me in my headphones. I wasn't really paying too much attention to where I was heading, but I occasionally glanced up and backwards to see if any cars were passing. Then, something made me look up. I looked back down to my phone and immediately raised my head again, as I was at that building yet again. It seemed even bigger in the dark. I had no idea how I even got there at that point. Google Maps just seemed to be trolling me at this point. Over in the room in the top right corner was a light. Not just any light, but it looked like candlelight. Lots of candles. I could see a shadow swinging in and out of view. I called the police just in case. I wasn't taking a chance again. I then, for some reason, dipped into my bag and pulled out my handycam. The zoom on handycams is great, and it focused really well. Well, it confirmed to me that the shadow was not a shadow, but it was a person. The man. The monster with a noose around his neck. I felt a cold shiver down my spine. Then my phone vibrated. A ghastly was there on the screen. I tapped it and the AR camera told me to pan upwards. I took a photo with the ghastly, and in the background you can see the man hanging in the centre of the window. That ghastly is now stored in my phone as Monster. The odd thing is, when I tap on that particular ghastly to view its information, it's always got its back to me, as if recreating the moment of our first meeting. Whoever you were, I will always remember you. Whatever happened to you and that woman, I'm sure you'll both meet again. This ghastly will never be transferred, and it will be the marker of that night that I caught a human Pokemon.